Hey guys, Ryan from Ministry Auto. Unfortunately our MINI Cooper S R56 is blowing smoke, mainly when sitting idle at the lights. It's sort of a white, greyish smoke. It's not completely white, it's not completely grey. So we're going to try and identify what that is. There's a lot of theories out there on what parts to replace when this happens, because it's quite common on the N14. People are replacing PCV valves, turbos, and there's not a lot of information online on what the actual fix is. So we're going to go through a bit of a process on how to diagnose this issue and work out where the oil's entering the engine.
So basically the symptoms that we're getting when sitting at the lights for long periods of time, or 2 or 3 minutes of idle, we get a cloud of white smoke, greyish white smoke as we take off from the lights. Once the car's running and driving along, there's no smoke coming from the exhaust. This became particularly bad once we replaced the engine oil, actually straight after the service. It gets worse, and this is a lot of complaints I'm hearing on the N14. When the car's been serviced, the fault becomes much worse, and the smoke, obviously cleaner and thinner oil in there, is causing a lot more smoke to come out. So that's a bit of an indicator of possibly the turbocharger or leakage through the PCV. So what we did was to also, the other thing to note is that there's no smoke on startup. So cold start, normally if you have valve stem seal problems, you'll get a lot of smoke coming from the exhaust on a cold start. This engine has a zero smoke coming from it when it's dead cold. So so the valve stem seal's not likely. Can't rule them out completely. So we were thinking maybe positive crankcase ventilation system. And you'll see there's a lot of oil residue. It's because we've been doing some of the testing already. With the test that we ran, we removed this breather pipe for the PCV. So there's 2 of them, one on this side and the other side going directly into the intake. The one at the back goes into the intake manifold. This one goes into, if you have a MAF sensor, straight after the MAF sensor. This particular N14 doesn't. This one goes straight into the intake pre-turbo. So what we did was disconnect this guy, disconnected this, so the PCV basically wasn't feeding oil into the engine anywhere, and the car was still blowing a significant amount of smoke. So we know that it's likely not the positive crankcase ventilation system. So we'll have to keep testing. Now the engine's dead cold, so we're going to start her up and see if there's any smoke coming out the back. Lots of hydrocarbons, but no smoke, no oil or smoke coming out of that exhaust on cold start. Next thing to check is just if there is any oil coming out of this PCV valve, which we don't think there is, but good chance to just have a quick check. No real residue there, as we expected. We'll just check on the end of this pipe where the air enters to the turbocharge port. Now there is a little bit of oil residue there, which it's not huge amount. I'm just trying to get a look inside there. Just grab a light. I'm just taking the air intake off just to have a look inside the intake for the turbocharger. Always make sure you check the propeller inside for movement and play. There was a little bit of residue in there, but not more than I'd expect from an N14 with their current setup of PCV. So now we're going to take off the coolant reservoir to get a look at the high pressure side of the turbo to see if there's any oil in there. Then we're going to drain the coolant off. So we've removed the intake to check the ports for oil. Not a lot of residue in there. We're just having a look inside the outlet of the turbo, the compressor side, the pressure side if you will. Little bits of residue in there, and a fair bit more inside this pipe actually. So we're going to investigate further. We're going to take off the front end of the car so we can get access to the turbo and manifold. Now we've got the front bumper skin off. We're just going to pull the old intercooler off and just check to see if there's any oil in there. We can try and trace it back. And then failing that, we'll pull the whole front of the car forward by undoing some of these nuts around this brace, and then we'll slide it forward. So we're just pulling the intercooler off to have a look, make sure there's no oil in the chambers. So we're looking at the intake side of the intercooler, and it's looking a little bit of moisture in there, not a huge amount. Then through the other side of the intercooler, there's a whole bunch of oil in there, so it's literally dripping out. Front end now pulled forward. Now we're going to take the turbo heat shield off, get to our turbo. We've got a little bit more access now, maybe a 5 centimeters extra, which makes all the difference when you're pulling these guys out. It only blows smoke when it's red hot. It doesn't burn coolant, so the piston rings are unlikely and the head gasket's probably okay. We're going to take the turbocharger off and have a look around there, see what we can see. So we've removed the turbocharger and the exhaust manifold, and unfortunately we've found oil coming out of the exhaust ports, mostly on cylinder 3 and 4, the worst being closest to the turbocharger. So we're going to put a camera up there and have a look, see what we can see. So the ports were completely covered in oil. This is a picture of the cylinder 1, which was the best out of all of them. Obviously the cylinders closest to the turbocharger were getting a lot hotter than cylinder 1 and 2. That's why they were so much worse. So now we're just going to take the valve cover off and replace the valve stem seals. So the reason it didn't blow smoke from cold start is because the valve assembly sits up out of the bath of oil. Therefore, it wasn't dripping in overnight. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully it was thought-provoking when diagnosing your Mini. Make sure you hit that subscribe button.